Okay, principle number 1. People are not logical and rational. We desperately want people to be logical and rational at work, but I think there's also a part of us that instinctively knows that they aren't. I mean, come on, look at yourself even. Let's just have a little fun with this. How many illogical things have you already done this week? How many illogical things have you already done today? Human beings do not make decisions logically. Now, that's not to say that people don't use data in their decision making. It's just that most of the time, and this is particularly true at work, they just use it to justify what they've already decided to do. Now, don't be too hard on them because most of those decisions are made unconsciously. They're made on a subconscious level. We are not aware of them. But that doesn't mean that's not what's taking place. Okay, and to illustrate why that is, I'm going to teach you how our brain is hardwired to work. So years ago, I was at the airport on a Sunday morning. I was flying out to a conference, and I was still doing my PhD at the time, and diligent student as I was, I had brought a textbook with me about advanced quantitative research. But as you might imagine, at 9 a.m. on a Sunday morning, it just wasn't the most appealing thing to read. So I went to the airport bookstore, got your typical paperback bestseller, got on the plane, sat down. I sat down next to this really nice looking older man, and he had this very fancy suit on. He was talking to his wife on the phone, and they were still laughing and joking, and you could clearly see they still had a great relationship after probably a lot of years together. And I just kind of smiled and sat down, opened my book, and started reading. A couple minutes later, he has to hang up the phone with his wife, and he turns to me and he starts striking up a conversation because he was that type of guy. So we chit-chat a little bit, and a couple minutes into that, he asked me, he goes, "What are you reading?" And I have to admit that I probably turned as red as I had ever been in my life when I showed him my copy of 50 Shades of Grey and confessed that I was reading smut. But he laughed and he took out his copy of the Wall Street Journal and he pointed to not one, not two, but 3 stories about men having affairs on their wives and having to resign their positions because of it. And he said, "Look, I'm reading smut too." Now, what does that have to do with office politics? Not a damn thing. But now I know I have your attention. And here's why. You have to think of the way the brain works as being in 3 different parts: the old brain, the midbrain, and the new brain. The old brain was the very first part of our brain to develop way back when we were cavemen, and it is interested in 3 things: food, survival, and sex. If any of those 3 things comes up, our old brain turns on really quickly like a dog that has just seen a bone. Food, survival, and sex. Now, our old brain is a massive supercomputer, and we take in so much more information every single second than we are consciously aware of. In fact, we take in 11 million bits of data every single second, but we are only consciously aware of about 40 of them. Okay, so huge disconnect there. 11 million pieces of data go in, 40 of them make it into our conscious awareness. And our old brain is constantly scanning our environment, looking for those 3 things that it cares about, right? So if it sees food, danger, or sex, that is automatically going to make its way into that 40 bits of data. Now, the other thing to know about the old brain is that it tries really hard to make all of our decisions for us. When those decisions involve food, danger, or sex, the decision becomes pretty clear. Our old brain is going to go towards what it wants to do with that at that given moment, right? But if food, danger, or sex are not a factor, then it has to consult other parts of the brain. And the first part of the brain it consults is the midbrain. This is the part of our brain that processes all emotion. It was the next part of our brain to develop after the old brain. So it's a really powerful part of the brain. And when we're talking about emotions, they are processed on that subconscious level. We aren't always aware necessarily of why we're feeling happy or sad. Sometimes we are, sometimes we can take a pretty good guess, but sometimes it just happens, right? And we aren't quite sure what's going on. The midbrain is also that area of the brain that processes non-verbal communication. So we're constantly analyzing our environment, looking for cues to tell us what to think about it. So think about those times you walk into a room at work and before anyone has said anything, you just know something is wrong. Okay? Or you just meet someone and the two of you click. Or you meet someone and you instantly hate them. You have no cause to feel one way or the other, but you're having a really strong reaction to that person. Now, those feelings don't come from nowhere. That's processing all that 11 million pieces of information, and it's delivering you an answer. It's just not telling you how it got there. So we've got our survival instincts, we've got our emotions, and that leaves the new brain. And this is where we process all logic and reason. And this is what also gets us into trouble because this is the only part of the brain that we are consciously aware of. The part of the brain that processes logic and reason. The problem is that just because we are conscious of it doesn't mean it's the most influential part of the brain when it comes to decision making. Because all of our decisions are made by the old brain, and if it can't make a decision, it talks to the midbrain first. And what does that mean? What does that leave us with? Here's the thing you want to write down. Write this on a sticky note, put it on your computer monitor at work. It applies in almost any situation you find yourself in. Human beings make decisions emotionally, and then they justify them rationally. I'm going to say that one more time because it's really, really important. Human beings make decisions emotionally, and then they justify them rationally. And what that means for office politics is that there is no such thing as an objective reality because we filter objective information based on our emotional responses. And that means that office politics is inherently irrational. Benjamin Franklin knew this. He said, "Would you persuade? Speak of interest, not of reason." And what that means for work is that when we rely solely on logic and reason and data, we will fail every single time because emotion will always win over logic. It will win every single day of the week. Now, some of you right now are sitting there with your arms crossed and you're really not liking this information and you're insisting, I don't make decisions emotionally, everyone else makes decisions emotionally. Well, you can fight this, you can, it's certainly an option, but trust me, if you embrace this idea, you can use it to get more done and be more professionally successful than you ever dreamed. If you're ready to go, head on into the next video and we're going to talk about principle number 2.